It is time. Time for what? Time to do the final work on your deciduous bonsai before they start entering dormancy. Dormancy? It's the middle of summer. Exactly. I'm confused, you're confused. Let's dive into this. Now is an optimal time to do the final things on your deciduous bonsai before winter. Here, right behind me, is one of my big azaleas. And if I now go in and I decide I'm going to clip off a branch, and I start looking at this branch, what I can see is a slight swelling here at the base of the leaves. Here at the end of this sprout is the bud formation already taking place. We have passed the longest day of the year, and that means that in your trees a physiological change is happening. Know what is happening and you might grow better trees and actually have your azalea flowering next year. But the same goes for apples. If you want to defoliate or prune back strongly before winter, pay attention. We'll delve into what happens after the middle of summer. If you're in the northern hemisphere, about 4 weeks ago we had the longest day. If you're in the southern hemisphere, this would happen to you in 6 months' time. You just had the shortest day. For me, this is the latest moment that I will do very strong prunes with the aim of getting sprouts shooting this year. I will start working on my pines, but that is in another video which is already published. And at the end of the video I'll link through to my It Is Time to Prune Your Pine video. And also to start looking out when I'm pruning spring flowering bonsai. Because after the longest day, your tree is starting to slow down. Not immediately, but after 2, 3, 4 weeks, you can see a distinct difference in the growth of your bonsai. Now, if you look carefully, you see here that I've just clipped off all the long branches. I've thinned out the foliage, and with that, I hope to trigger this tree to sprout once more this year. In fact, I'm not just doing it on this tree. If you look at the floor here now, I've been pruning for hours. Day length is a very important trigger for trees and for other plants actually, to realize at what point in the year they are. Now, lengthening of the days for the trees is a clear sign I'm ever getting more energy. I'm still at the build-up phase of summer. However, as the days are shortening, the tree is flipped around. It realizes the days are shorter, hormonal balance changes, and when you then start pruning back like this strong, the tree might decide I'm not going to invest into new branches. This is of course not a conscious decision, it is just a response. It is how the physiology of the tree at that point is built up, and that is why you need to be careful. Now I have a very big hornbeam, and this was suffering from a fungal infection earlier this year, so I just treated it, and then I didn't prune all that much and I just let a few branches run. And I now look at the new leaves, and the leaves are completely free of the fungal infection. I would like to prune this back and thin it out. That I can still do with a hornbeam. Now, if you would do this with a linden tree would not be so happy after the longest day. Now, because linden trees are poor backbutters, poor responders to pruning and defoliation after the middle of summer, I already did this one about 4 weeks ago, and you can see it has started to push, so I'm lucky it will get another spurt of growth this season. But don't try to do this after the middle of July, because I find these to be unreliable. You can do it, but don't be surprised if your linden doesn't resprout. I have found that hornbeams, which are well fertilized and well watered and in good sun, they will push another push after the middle of summer, quite reliably. However, last year I figured I'll do that, and the tree was weak. There had not been any extension growth, and it sulked. It didn't come back all that well, and the branches were fairly bare. Now this year it is a lot stronger, so I'm going to thin it out, but I'm not going to completely bare it. I'm just going to remove all the leaves except for 1 or 2 on every single branch, and I'm going to shorten it back into profile. This is a lot more work than it seems, so I'm just going to do this off camera. I'm not going to bother you with the whole process. When it comes to Japanese maples, I'm always a little bit unsure what to say. The reason is, I know that Japanese maple can be fooled into resprouting all the way until October. So that's another couple of months away. The problem is, October here is the month that we could get the first frost. And it can switch from having nice warm days to having frosty nights just within a day or two. So I don't like to trigger my Japanese maples back into growth after the middle of summer. So I do my final round of pruning now, and then I will typically just leave them alone and let the tree to decide I'm going to stop growing. You can see here I removed an air layer here last week, and I put a new air layer in place, and that one is exactly to do what I always do if I'm not sure. I'm just trying it out. In this case, I'm trying out, can you still in July put an air layer on and separate it successfully this year, plant it up, and then have a healthy tree in spring? Who knows? I've just been pruning all my Japanese maples today. That will give me a flush of branches now. They will all stay very thin, match or thinner whatever regrows this year, that I can still use or prune away later in the season without really harming the tree. So then I can just let it go from here on. They might grow out a little bit more, but that's it. This hornbeam I defoliated earlier in the year, and that was also because it has had a fungal infection, and it has recovered marvelously. There's not a single leaf infected right now, and actually this shows again that defoliation of a hornbeam when they have fungal infections and then treating as it regrows really gives you a very, very nice set of leaves. Now, if we know that backbudding is unreliable, why would we actually do what I'm doing right now and in late June, early July still prune our bonsai? Wouldn't it be just a lot easier to leave them alone and in winter prune and not worry about it now? Well, no, actually, no. There's a good reason why I am still pruning my trees extensively today. Somebody's mowing the lawn here. I'll switch off the camera. But what this also shows is if you come closer, you can see that the branches have very short internodes, and that is typical for later growing season branches. So pruning right now can trigger a resprout of the tree, but because there's so much light, the branch typically has very short internodes, and that's really, really good. So pruning now is actually a very good thing to do. You remove all these long stalks that have grown over the growing season. They've aided in fattening up the branches, but before you get the second stage of swelling, which is happening in fall, you remove these long canes. It resprouts with very young, thin branches and short internodes. Perfect for building your structure, for building your new branches. And that is used to wire out and build your next structure. It will be thin, will be pliable, it will have short internodes. So that's a really good reason why you should still prune around June or July. Now you can recognize the azalea flowers by just really gently feeling the leaves. There is a substantial thickening here at the end of the growing tip. So it looks like there are still leaves forming and it looks like the branch is still growing, so it would be safe to prune. But in fact, if I now prune this azalea, I will prune off all the buds. So it is best to not prune your azalea after the longest day of the year, which in the Northern Hemisphere would be the 21st of June. Make sure that you've pruned it before then. Then everything that grows will create new buds, and those buds will hold the flowers for next year. Similarly, this pear, for instance, but also an apple, a malus, a cherry tree, everything that flowers from the buds of the last year, so that in spring the flowers come out with the leaves or before the leaves, it is important to stop pruning early in the summer. This pear has stopped growing, some thick buds are developing. To be honest, this has never flowered for me yet, but I have good hope that in the next year there will be flowers. But this is, in part, pruning. Summer pruning, late summer pruning of flowering bonsai can cause you to prune off your flowers. So for the species that you're working on, do check whether it is safe to prune after the middle of summer. And yeah, elms is, of course, they will resprout whenever you prune them. They will regrow, they'll keep on growing, and the branches will become long, straight and fat. And you really need to prune elm as well now, but even later this summer I might have to prune this. It feels like it's just 3 weeks ago that I last pruned it. In fact, it is 3 weeks ago since I last pruned it. Here I'm mainly thinning out, shortening these branches, and in winter I'll do a full cleanup of all these. This is really to increase internal ramification. I've decided that most of the branches of this elm have the fatness that I need, so I don't need to really worry about letting long branches grow to fatten up the branches. The only exception is here in the top there's a small branch that I want to fatten up. Everything else I just slowly want to build up ramification and yeah, a denser canopy. It is getting already quite dense, to be honest. So a little recap. After the longest day, the growth of your trees slows down. That means that they don't respond as strongly to pruning or defoliation. A month or so after the longest day, when you then start defoliating, a whole range of tree species will not reliably backbud. Hornbeam and elm and some of these species will backbud quite strongly, assuming they're healthy. For slower to respond species like maples, Japanese maples particularly, there is a risk that they do start growing after defoliating and strong pruning in July, and that these branches do not mature enough before the first frost comes. This depends, of course, where in the world you are, how warm your summer is, and when your first frost date is. When you have flowering bonsai and the flowers occur early in spring and they come straight from the branches, you don't get a lot of extension growth. There's a big risk of pruning away flower buds if you start pruning after the middle of July. As such, it is time to now prune everything that you still need to prune, but if you do, check whether the end buds have already set on your flowering bonsai. Now there's a good reason why we do take this risk, because the regrowth that you get later in the year has short internodes, is nice and thin, and can be used in setting the main branches or even the final crown, the final canopy of your tree. So there's benefits in pruning now in the middle of summer as well. This was Jelle, growing bonsai with a short tip. Prune your bonsai now, or consider not pruning until the leaves have dropped. Now for the video on pruning pine, it is time. Check there. And if you would like to watch how this tree was styled over a period of 2.5 years, watch there.